Well, good afternoon to you. 507 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, we'll be talking energy with Daniel Turner as Joe Biden does everything he can to raise your gas prices in an election year. Why is he doing that? We'll discuss. We'll talk to you at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. A couple weeks back, we had President Donald Trump right here on the program, and he said that he thinks Virginia is very much in play this year, and he's going to be working to win the Commonwealth. And among his surrogates is his former competitor, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, who now joins me on the phone. Governor, great to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Hey, Vince, fantastic. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for all you do.
Of course, sir. I understand you will be in the Commonwealth tomorrow. Tell me what brings you here, sir.
Well, looking forward to it. I'll be at a Virginia Advanced GOP event, statewide event tomorrow. Of course, Glenn Youngkin's going to be there. Looking forward to greeting all those great Virginians, and of course, such an important state with the role that it plays, particularly in national security with all the military activity going on there. But I think I'm just very excited to get there and talk to everybody.
Yeah, that's great. So not every candidate who got out of the race endorsed Trump and decided to back him and to be a surrogate for him in his campaign, but you did. Why do you think it's so important to get Trump elected this year against Joe Biden?
Well, I think if you're any person in the country, if you got to put food on your table, you got to put gas in your car, if you got to pay an electrical bill, if you have to do any of those things, which is like every American, then you should actually. This is a tale of two presidencies, and Joe Biden, as you talked about on your lead-in, I mean, Joe Biden is destroying the U.S. energy. He's driving the prices through the roof. Electricity up 30% under Joe Biden. And it's just going to get worse, both the price and the reliability, because their policies are crushing U.S. energy under this fantasy that somehow this false premise is built. The whole thing is built on a false premise that if you shut down U.S. energy production, you're doing a good thing for the environment. And when we shut down U.S. energy, we empower our adversaries and we raise the price for our consumers at home. And our adversaries then fill that demand with energy that's produced way less cleanly than ours. And so it's actually worse for the environment. It's worse for the consumer. It's worse for national security. There's not one single thing behind this whole approach that they have where they feel like they're taking the moral high ground on the environment when, in fact, all the policies they're doing are actually hurting the global environment, and they're hurting America at the same time, and they're hurting American consumers. So, if he keeps this up, I think Virginia is going to be in play. I think the whole nation's in play because people are going to figure out with their pocketbooks that the goals of the Biden administration are not helping the average, especially the people that can afford it the least.
It does seem like one of the most obvious policy areas where you'd be focusing on increasing American energy production because, the border, that's one, obviously. You got to secure the border. You don't have a country if you don't have borders. And then with energy, you actually get energy going and fired up and producing a ton of it, and it's cheap. It brings the cost of everything down. And then it doesn't empower all these adversaries, does it? We've got Russia and Venezuela and Iran who are being as belligerent as ever, and that's thanks to the sky-high energy prices, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And then it just doesn't stop. I mean, a few weeks ago, hey, we're going to put a pause on LNG export. I mean, there was a party in the Kremlin that night when that policy was announced, probably a big party in Tehran as well. And then it's helping them. And who's it hurting? Well, it's hurting the environment because the biggest contributor to a decrease in global emissions was the fact that clean U.S. natural gas was replacing other forms of fuel around the world. And so, again, it doesn't achieve the objective they're trying to, and it hurts us, helps our adversaries, as you just said, in not a little way, in a big way. I mean, Biden's policies and the Swiss cheese sanctions we put on Russia, Biden's helped make Putin the richest guy in the world by far.
Yeah, it's awful. It's just truly awful. And that's a great phrase, by the way, Swiss cheese sanctions. On this energy front, I'll be talking coming up with Daniel Turner from Power of the Future about this. But today, the New York Times reports the Biden administration has made it what they say is more expensive for fossil fuel companies to pull oil, gas, and coal from public lands. They're raising fees on all of the oil energy companies all across the United States. The government also increasing more than tenfold the cost of the bonds that companies must secure before they start drilling. When I see a headline like that, Governor Doug Burgum, I think instantly, well, wait a second. That means that I'm going to have to pay more. If all these energy companies are paying more, the consumer's going to have to pay more. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're absolutely right. You will pay more, but the other thing is the energy companies might go, hey, if you raise the price of something times 1,500% is what the bond increase is. If you went into a store and said, oh, it used to cost X yesterday and now it's going to cost 15 times more tomorrow, you'd probably say, I'm not going to buy that. And what's going to happen is what they're achieving their objectives. People won't, develop energy on federal lands, which is their goal, and that's going to raise the price for consumers of everything. Just look around. If whoever your listeners are, look around the room. If you see a shirt, if you see, a pair of shoes, if you see a tire, if you see anything, if you're in your car, every component has got an energy component in it. When we raise the price of energy, we raise the price of everything, and so this inflation. And another thing, which they're just so confused about, Vince, is they act like this is their land. Biden and his administration act like they're the great protectors of this land. This land, the federal land, belongs to the American people. 240 million acres put away by Theodore Roosevelt for the benefit and the use of the American people. And they have a set of policies that basically said, we're not going to cut a tree. We're not going to develop rare earth minerals. We're not going to develop clean U.S. energy. We're going to stop doing that. And then somehow that's helping the country. That's America's balance sheet. And they're basically saying, no, we're not going to use our balance sheet. We'll get our rare earth minerals from China, who's tearing up Indonesia, Central African Republic, destroying the environment around the world. I mean, sort of what, for their to do value signaling and then, export their environmental guilt to people that don't even have an EPA. I mean, it's senseless is what it is, and it's reckless, and it's destabilizing the world. Part of the reason we're at war right now is because of these energy policies.
And it's also provoking, in practical terms, a very radical political realignment. You're watching as people of lower means have realized that Democrats are not serving them. There's nothing pro-human about their policies here. In fact, the people who can least afford it are suffering the most, Governor. Have you ever seen anything like this in your time in politics?
No, I haven't. And then again, the people with these policies, they act like, oh, they're the ones that are thinking about the globe. There's over 3 million people a year that die of respiratory diseases, but it's not from smoking. It's from burning wood. I mean, wood worldwide is producing more power than wind is. And they think wind is the answer to everything. Well, you can't, if we shut down these LNG export terminals, part of that fuel was going out to places like Clean U.S. Propane to help people who've never had electricity or cooking dinner over wood in their hut, could be using propane coming from the United States. Literally saving lives, lowering the cost, building allies, supporting our allies. Who's one of the biggest importers of LNG is? Japan, our ally. No, I guess we're not going to support our allies. Western Europe, that whole war with Ukraine started because Western Europe became dependent on Russian gas. And then the Biden administration keeps going to China. China is the world's most dependent energy country in the world. They import 10 million barrels of oil and gas a day. And then what do? We just turn Iran and Russia into the discount gas station for China. China's filling their strategic petroleum reserve to record heights. Biden drained ours in half ahead of the midterms, turned a strategic petroleum reserve into a political petroleum reserve.
Yeah. In fact, he sold off a lot of our emergency supplies to China, of all places. And meanwhile, Iran's terror regime is being financed by 90% of its exports going right to China. So it's like, all of this can be solved. Yeah. And there are some simple answers here, aren't there, Governor?
Well, there are. And I love your last point, Vince. Iran, who we used to have sanctions under President Trump, we had tight sanctions on Iran. Those guys were almost broke. Now they've got, $100 billion plus on their balance sheet, and they're selling drones to Russia to attack us. They're funding, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Houthi. So they're the world's largest funder of terrorism, and they're doing it because of our policies. That's what's happening.
In other words, it can be stopped. Governor Doug Burgum from beautiful North Dakota, thank you, sir, and enjoy your time here in the Commonwealth of Virginia as well. So thank you very much.
Well, it can be stopped, and it's going to go the other way. It's why we have to get President Trump elected, because this will change on day one.
That'd be a big deal. Again, Governor Doug Burgum, thank you very much, sir. Good to talk to you today.
Thank you.
I do want to bring you to, meanwhile, Donald Trump, President Trump, is speaking now down in Florida, Mar-a-Lago, alongside the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who earlier today voted to reauthorize spying on you by the United States government without a warrant. That's disappointing. But here he is holding himself close to Donald Trump as they talk about election integrity. Let's check in. I'll start it from the beginning of their remarks.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to have you at Maralago. My $18 million house on the ocean and the bay. And it's one of the problems we have. We have a court system that's very corrupt. We have a border that's open. We have a lot of problems in our country. And we have an election problem, and that's really what we're here to talk about today. Speaker Johnson's going to be briefing you on what we discussed, what we agree on. But I would like to demand that our border be closed because we have millions of people coming into our country. Millions and millions of people are pouring in at levels that nobody's reporting, nobody's going to talk about. But I believe you could have 15 million already in. Some are terrorists. They come from jails and prisons. They come from mental institutions and insane asylums. They come from all over the world, not just South America. They're coming from all over the world. Venezuela announced that their crime is down 67%. Because of the fact that they've taken the gang members, the leaders and the members, and they've deposited them very nicely into the United States of America. That's just Venezuela. It's happening with the Congo. It's happening with countries all over Africa, Asia, South America, all over the world it's happening. Our country is like a dumping ground, and we're going to have it stopped. And Biden should do it immediately. He should close the border immediately. He needs no legislation. He doesn't need this gentleman. He doesn't need anybody. He can do it. I did it without any legislation. I had the best border we've had in ever recorded history. He can close it immediately. If he would have left, we had stay in Mexico, remain in Mexico. We had catch and release in Mexico, not here. We had everything. It was perfect. It was a great situation we had, and now we have the worst ever. I don't believe in the history of the world there's been a border like this, but we probably have 15 million people, and they come from places that you don't want to know about, and they're going to be big problems, and it's getting worse. It's migrant crime. It's a new category of crime, migrant crime. And I just demand, as a citizen, I demand the border has to be closed. Our country cannot take it. No country could take it. It's not sustainable by any country. And we want to also mention election interference, and we want to talk about election integrity for a little while. But basically, that's what we're working on. And I'll introduce the speaker, who you know very well. He's doing a really good job under very tough circumstances. And I appreciate he came to Maralago. We have a great conference, and there's a big turnout because people want this to be healed. They want our country to be healed. They want our country to be united. And I think most people are united on the fact that they don't want people pouring in from prisons and jails and mental institutions. They don't want that to happen. They don't want it to take place. And it's not going to happen for long. And that's why I say that November 5th is going to be the most important day in the history of our country. That's the election. It's going to be the most important day in the history of our country. Thank you very much. And Speaker, thank you.
All right. In a moment, I'll play Speaker Mike Johnson's remarks just starting this press conference. We'll pick it up from there.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, and it's good to see you all. We're so delighted to be here with our former and future president in this beautiful facility. Maralago is famous around the country, and we're grateful to be here. With President Trump as our nominee in the party, we are very much looking forward to that historic day in November, because we are going to grow the House majority, we're going to win the United States Senate, and we're going to win back the White House as well. The American people need us to do that. They're excited for that day, and November cannot get here soon enough. The Speaker of the House, when we're not in session, the Speaker is required to go around, fly around the country, and be with all of our candidates and incumbents all around. I've been to 23 states now in the last several weeks, and everywhere we go, one of the first questions that people ask about is this issue of election integrity. The border is the #1 issue in America. There's never been a political issue that scored so high in the polls as a matter of concern. And it doesn't matter where anyone lives, because as we say now, every state is a border state. They're deeply concerned about that. And election integrity is tied to the lack of border security. President Biden has created a catastrophe, and he did it by design. We documented 64 specific executive actions that he took from the day he walked into the Oval Office, and that his agencies took under Secretary Mayorkas to open the border wide, to invite everybody from around the world to come here, including hardened criminals and dangerous persons. And the result, we all know. The official number is 9 million encounters at the southern border alone, just since Joe Biden took office. But the actual number is probably close to 16 million illegals who have come into the country because they desired it, they designed it, they engineered it to be that way. His actions did that. He he ended the Remain in Mexico policy under President Trump's administration. They reinstated catch and release that had been practiced under the Obama administration. They stopped building the wall. They did everything exactly the opposite of what this president had achieved, and that's why we have this catastrophe. It has all sorts of terrible effects on the American people. We know that fentanyl is the leading cause of death for Americans age 18 to 49. We know that violent crimes are being committed on innocent Americans now. Lake and Riley and many others who are now losing their lives because these dangerous people are in our country, and it must stop. And the American people are demanding that it does. And it doesn't matter which political party that any American is in, they have the same desire. They want safety and security, and we can supply that. But among the problems that flows from this open border catastrophe is directly related to this threat to our election integrity. Why is that? You need to understand something really important about federal law. Since 1993, the National Voter Registration Act, we call it the Motor Voter Law, allows people to sign up to vote when they get a driver's license. If an individual only asserts or simply states that they are a citizen, they don't have to prove it. They can register that person to vote in a federal election. And you see, states are currently prohibited, believe it or not, the states are prohibited from asking someone to prove that they're a citizen. The federal voter registration form just has a check-a-box, and if you do that, you're good. The states can't allow it. Well, we think that's a serious problem. And so what we're going to do is the House Republicans are introducing a bill that will require proof of citizenship to vote. It seems like common sense. I'm sure all of us would agree. We only want U.S. citizens to vote in U.S. elections.
All right, there you go. An announcement of a piece of legislation from Maralago. That was Speaker Mike Johnson standing alongside President Trump. We'll pick up with that news conference coming up right after our news here on WMAL. Hey, good afternoon to you. 5:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. I return now to the news conference down in Maralago. Just concluded moments ago. I want to play some of this for you. Here is Donald Trump, President Trump, stepping up to the microphone, taking some questions for the press. He's standing next to Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, who just announced that he will be introducing legislation in order, should it pass, both the House and the Senate, requiring nationwide that you prove you're an American citizen before you vote. Seems like a pretty common sense requirement. Here's President Trump.
Do you support Marjorie Taylor Greene's motion to vacate, or do you stand behind Speaker Johnson?
We're getting along very well with the Speaker, and I get along very well with Marjorie. We have a Speaker. He was voted in, and it was a complicated process, and I think it's not an easy situation for any Speaker. I think he's doing a very good job. He's doing about as good as you're going to do, and I'm sure that Marjorie understands that. She's a very good friend of mine, and I know she has a lot of respect for the Speaker.
And would you support a Ukrainian aid bill if the Speaker was to move forward with it?
We're looking at it right now, and they're talking about it, and we're thinking about making it in the form of a loan instead of just a gift. We keep handing out gifts of billions and billions of dollars, and we'll take a look at it. But much more importantly to me is the fact that Europe has to step up and they have to give money. They have to equalize. If they don't equalize, I'm very upset about it because they're affected much more than we are. The Ukraine situation would have never happened if I was president. Would have never, ever happened. And everybody says that, including Democrats, that it happened is such an outrage. Millions of people are dead right now, both sides. Millions of people are dead. Cities are blown to ashes. You'll never rebuild those cities. That's certainly not like they were, so beautiful. And this is something should have never happened. October 7th should have never happened in Israel. Should have never happened. What happened there was outrageous. Iran was broke when I was president. People weren't buying oil from Iran. They weren't allowed to. If they were going to buy oil from Iran, then they weren't going to do any business in the U.S. And I said it to China. I said it to everybody. They weren't doing business. They were broke. They didn't have money for Hamas. They didn't have money for Hezbollah. It would have never happened. October 7th would have never happened. It did happen, and now it's a disaster, and it's only getting worse. So it's very sad. No, I stand with the Speaker. We've had a very good relationship.
Mr. President, while you were in office, you said that you would sign a federal abortion ban if Congress sent it to your desk. Why should Americans trust your word that you would not do it now if you were reelected?
Because we don't need it any longer, because we broke Roe v. Wade, and we did something that nobody thought was possible. We gave it back to the states, and the states are working very brilliantly, in some cases conservative, in some cases not conservative, but they're working, and it's working the way it's supposed to. Every legal scholar, real legal scholar, wanted to have it go back to the states, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, and we're able to do that. You know, what we did was give it back to the states, and now the states are working their way through it, and you're having some very, very beautiful harmony, to be honest with you. You have some cases like Arizona that went back to like 1864 or something like that, and a judge made a ruling, but that's going to be changed by government. They're going to be changing that. I disagree with that. Excuse me, please.
Just a follow-up. Over the last few decades, Mr. President, you have both considered yourself pro-choice and pro-life. Which one is it?
Well, you know exactly which one it is. And when I was in New York and when I was a Democrat also, just like Ronald Reagan, you know, Ronald Reagan was a Democrat. We sort of followed a very similar path. But if you look at what we've done with Roe v. Wade, we did something that everyone said couldn't be done, and we got it done. And I give great credit to the Supreme Court and the justices for having the courage to do it. What they did is very simply give it back to the state. And I'll tell you, the Democrats are the radicals on this because they're willing to have abortions in the 7th, 8th, 9th month. They're even willing, and you can call it what you want, but you go back to the governor of Virginia, the previous governor of Virginia, the Democrat governor of Virginia, where he talked about execution of a baby after birth. And you can say what you want, but that's extreme and that's radical, and nobody should have that, and it has to be ended. Please, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Mr. President, do you think the motion to vacate rules should be finally changed, or do you think that it's just creating chaos right now?
Well, it's unfortunate that people bring it up because right now we have much bigger problems. The country is we're a nation in decline. We're a declining nation. We have tremendous inflation. The inflation's coming back at levels that nobody thought they really would have. If you look at the categories of inflation, they have the worst categories. Many categories are not included. And if you included that, your inflation number would be substantially higher than it is now, and it's already at records. So inflation is back. And a lot of bad things are happening in our country, but that's the least of it. You've got Russia you could end up in a world war between Russia, Ukraine, and all of the chaos, and that's something should have never happened. It would have never happened. What's going on with Israel, October 7th, and what's going on with Israel could end up in a world war. We have a president that can't put two sentences together. We have a president that can't find the stairs off a stage. We have a president that doesn't know what the hell he's doing. And we could end up in a world war. You know, we have just a little bit less than 7 months before November 5th. But that's an eternity when people are incompetent. Go ahead,
good
please.
line, by the way. Good line.
FISA bill that was passed this morning?
Which one?
FISA bill, and did you talk to anyone?
Well, I'm not a big fan of FISA. I looked at it, and I studied it, and I know it probably better than anybody. You know, they spied on my campaign. You do know that, right? And they did lots of other bad things. I'm not a big fan of FISA, but I told everybody, I said, do what you want. They put a lot of checks and balances on, and I guess it's down to 2 years now, so that it would come due in the early part of my administration on the basis that we live up to the polls, because all the polls, we just had another one come out, we're leading by a lot, but it comes out quickly. I said, you do what you want, but I'm not a big fan of FISA. I think it's terrible. Yeah, Bob?
You plan to testify in your trial in New York?
Yeah, I would testify, absolutely. It's a scam. It's a scam. That's not a trial. That's not a trial.
The Alvin Bragg case.
If you read Jonathan Turley, if you read Andy McCarthy, if you read the legal, they said there's not even a case there. That's election interference by the Biden administration. They actually took their top guy, one of their top guys, put him into the DA's office to run it, and it's a shame. What they have done is incredible. It's election interference, and it's got to stop.
Even Michael Avenatti says it's a bad case, if you can believe it.
You read Jonathan Turley, you read Andrew McCarthy, you read the legal scholars. Every single one of them said that whole thing is a scam. It's not even a crime. And what they're doing is a crime. They are criminals. All right, Bob?
Can I just follow up on that?
Why do you believe it is important for you to testify, take the stand in this upcoming trial? And what are you watching as jury selection begins in New York?
Well, you know, jury selection is largely luck. It depends who you get. It's very unfair that I'm having a trial there. It's very unfair that we have this judge who hates Trump and has tremendous conflict, as you know, tremendous conflict. Nobody can believe that this judge isn't recusing himself. The conflict is at a level that nobody's ever seen before. So I have that, and I have venue. We have all these things that we've asked for. They don't give us anything. It's a witch hunt that takes place in New York, and that is taking place, and it's very bad for New York, and it's very bad, for the judicial system in New York. I'm testifying. I tell the truth. I mean, all I can do is tell the truth, and the truth is that there's no case. They have no case, and again, you have to read the scholars, read all of the legal scholars. I haven't seen one legal scholar that said this is a case. And in fact, even you people said, oh, gee, that's too bad. This is the first one. All of them are scams. They're all about election interference. We have a president that doesn't know where he is. He can't speak. The whole world is collapsing. The world is on fire. They have no respect for our country anymore. And the only way he thinks he can win is by doing this, trials of Trump. We have Fawny in Atlanta, who's been so discredited now. That was a setup with her boyfriend so they could take trips and take a lot of money out. And that's something that should be dismissed. Not just the prosecutor dismissed, the case should be dismissed. Every single one of them said, look at what happened with Biden. He gets off scot-free. With 50 years of documents and classified information, he gets off scot-free. And I'm still fighting that trial. The whole thing is a disgrace, and it's a disgrace to our nation.
By the way, Speaker Johnson's nodding along solemnly at all the answers here.
U.S. and Israeli intelligence reports. Yeah. Have you spoken with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu? Yeah. How should the United States respond? And the same question for you, Mr. Speaker.
I don't want to say who I spoke to, but for the president of our country to actually put out a warning that he thinks that we're going to be attacked or they're going to be attacked, that's pretty pathetic. They wouldn't be attacking Israel if I were president, that I can tell you, and they never did. They wouldn't be attacking. Iran was in no position to attack. They had no money. They were broke. But now they have $221 billion, and they have Iraq, who has $300 billion, and Iraq has become a subsidiary of Iran. With all that we've done, with all of the fighting, all of the death, look at what happened, how incompetent the whole thing is. But I don't want to say who I spoke to, but I think it's a very, very dangerous period. This is a very dangerous period of time in our nation, and a big reason that it's dangerous that we have a president that's grossly incompetent. Thank you all very much.
Speaker Johnson, why did you come here today?
All right, there you go. So people shouting some questions as they head off into one of the palatial rooms of Maralago. That's the former president of the United States, perhaps future Donald Trump, alongside Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. A number of interesting answers there as we get an opportunity to hear him talk about certainly the cases against him. He says he's going to testify in New York. He's ready and willing to testify in that Alvin Bragg case up in New York as the left tries to destroy him any way they can. Of course, that's the most ridiculous of all of the ridiculous cases. He's pleased to testify there. He says, no problem for me. I just tell the truth. So he'll be setting about doing that, he claims. And then also talking about abortion. He said he's proud of Roe v. Wade being overturned, the Dobbs decision. He says now it's left to the states. I think he used the word, there's some harmony going on all across the country as the states work out all of these various positions. Remember, earlier this week, he was critical of that Arizona court for saying that the 1864 law still stands that bans almost every abortion in the state of Arizona. But again, remember, this is the guy who said, leave it to the states. Well, the states are resolving it. In Arizona's case, that's what they're up to. He's still critical of it. He said he'd like to see them move swiftly to change the law there. But the end result of that, if they change the law, would be to accommodate more baby deaths. So here I am hoping that more babies don't die. That's the position I'm taking on this subject. And I hope as many lives can be saved as possible. That's critical. That's critical. Let's see here. We have Daniel Turner standing by. Good. We have the excellent Daniel Turner standing by, who's been waiting so patiently to join us, and I'm always so grateful for him. Daniel Turner is the founder and executive director of Power of the Future, and he joins us now. Daniel, good to talk to you again, sir.
Vince, it's great to be on with you, and I thank the president and the speaker for warming up for me.
Yes, I think that's essential. I always think that's great. Let's talk energy with you. I was just talking a moment ago with North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum about this subject too. But I saw this piece today that from the New York Times and elsewhere that the Biden administration is right now raising costs on oil companies, on energy companies, for drilling and mining on public lands. And it's not a small increase. We're talking, as Governor Burgum mentioned, something like 1,500% an increase on the fees for the bonds that companies need to secure before they start drilling. Will American energy consumers feel this, and how quickly?
Oh, they will. And you know, the way this is going to impact the most is the small mom and pop shops. And there are thousands of them. 80% of America's oil comes from small, independent, family-run businesses. So everyone knows the name Exxon, Mobil, and Conoco and Chevron, but 80% of our oil comes from these small businesses, and they can't afford those increases in fees without a doubt. And so that's going to have a real problem with producing oil. There's an enormous disconnect between the people who run the White House and the people running the Biden campaign. And I'm sure the White House people see the writing on the wall. Maybe they think they're toast, and they're just going to do 7 more months of punishing fossil fuels. But this decision, all it will do is make energy more expensive, oil more expensive. It will make inflation higher, and it will hurt Biden politically. So I don't understand. I don't understand the political logic behind this unless you're so beholden to the green movement and you realize you've got limited time, so let's screw oil and gas one more time as the door closes.
We know that they have a ravenous appetite for destroying the American energy industry, but it's head spinning for them to try and do this during an election year. It's self-sabotage. In fact, I hardly am here to give the Biden campaign any advice, but I would like to see American energy prices come down.
Yeah, and to go from leases for a $10,000 bond to $150,000, that's not an increase, right? That's not raising rates. That's absurdity to go from 10,000 to 150,000. And this nonsense you're going to hear, well, we need that money for capped wells, for orphan wells. Biden loves to talk about orphan wells. The problem with orphan wells, not to get too much in the weeds, is that yes, this money is set aside and the government holds it for orphan wells, but then they spend it. Right, so they spend all the money, and then they say, "Oh boy, we don't have any money for orphan wells because we gave it to migrants."
Well, that sounds familiar.
Transgender study, exactly.
That's like the entire Social Security Ponzi scheme that we're all living through. Did you save my money for Social Security? No, we spent that years ago.
Exactly, and that's how they're going to lie and say we need this money because we need it for orphan wells. We pay for orphan well, we pay for well capping, but government spends the money because government runs enormous deficits. And so, again, the disconnect here of punishing the economy further in these last couple of months. There's no bright spot of the economy right now at all, and you do an amazing job talking about this. There's nothing bright to look forward to in the Biden economy. And we're getting closer and closer to the November deadline. So that's how powerful green philosophy is. You will tank your guy if it means just pushing this crazy agenda a little further.
Yeah. And it also makes me more worried about how dangerous they're going to be in the months ahead. If they're willing to do this in the midst of an election year, what else are they going to do? In the meantime, Daniel Turner, again, thank you. I know our time was brief today. We'll have you back again soon. Really appreciate it, sir.
WMAL, making sense of education, because what's happening in your kid's school matters. Download the WMAL app to stream us for free.
Oh, speaking of the hapless Biden campaign, did you hear they're paying Biden's legal fees with donor money?
President Biden's legal fees in the classified documents probe were paid for by campaign donations. That's according to Axios.
Yeah, this after spending all that time being like, I can't believe Trump's using campaign money to pay off his legal fees. Yeah, because you're trying to destroy his campaign by throwing him in court all the time. Also, one more update for you on the Biden campaign. They are currently in the midst of hiring a DEI director. They're going to pay that person up to $120,000, according to the Washington Examiner. The listing just went up. I, for one, think that that's not enough. they need to hire many more people than just one. I want to see their full commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Spend all that campaign money on that. I think that'll really help your campaign. It'll make it super efficient. Can't wait to see it. Can't wait for you to have a great weekend. The great one, Mark Levin, up next here on WMAL.